Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundless success to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Correll, and we've been doing this for a while now. The last couple, 2.5 years, I've been doing it with my partner in knocking people alive, Jan Jeremias, who's here with me today. How you doing, Jan?
I'm doing okay. I'm really happy to be here with you, Bill.
Same here. I guess that's a good descriptor. I am happy to be here, and I'm actually feeling a little bit better than I have in the last week. Fighting a cold or whatever the heck it is. But in the meantime, life has been good. But it's an extraordinary time of year for us over here because we've got everything blooming. You know, we've got the grass is turning green. We had some nice rain on Saturday. It's gorgeous out today. It's going to be in the 70s, which I can't say I get enough of, because whenever it's that warm, we get in the convertible and we ride around and mess our hair up, you know?
Absolutely. And as you say that, I was chatting. So, Bill, I'm doing an in-person event on Saturday, which is always exciting for me because we're online so much when you actually get to like be with people. And I
Yeah.
happen to be outside at a farm. And so I went for a walk on the farm over the weekend so I can kind of plan what I want to do for this meditation. And it was just, first of all, it was it's like the perfect time because um there is still the remnants of winter. So there's still some areas or some things which have not fully bloomed yet. And then there are other things which are just starting. So you see the stages. And then there are other things which are full blown, like in glory.
Yeah.
Just the contrast, even on the same tree or bush, of areas which haven't gone over yet and are still kind of working their way toward like that explosion. And it was
Yeah.
I think it's the perfect weekend. Like as far as it's going to be the perfect weekend to actually do the program, because I felt like that's life. Like we have the remnants of memories and things that have in the past, and we're in the present and we're thinking about the future. And so I just thought it's like perfect visual for that experience, for the life experience.
It's marvelous. And I guess this is the best time of year for me, because when you get into the full blown summer, it's like just more of the same. Yeah, the leaves are out and like, who cares? Okay. But we go through this period of darkness where everything looks dirty and brown, and there's just no life on the trees, or so just walking around my yard, we've got waves of violets, pink, blue, and white violets that are randomly here and there. And then the neat part of it is this is that time of year when we start getting, dandelions.
Mhm.
And most years we're blessed by having a woodchuck in the backyard that likes to go around and scarf the tops of those yellow dandelions. He thinks they are the best ever. Just he'll go boop boop boop, and then boop 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 boop, and the next thing you know, I mean, there's no more yellow dandelions in the yard, but we got a happy woodchuck running around. We've been through 2 waves of magnolias. We have these brilliant white star magnolias. They're absolutely amazing. They actually started blooming about 3 weeks ago. And then our southern magnolias started blooming beginning of last week, and they're starting to get towards the end of their time too, because most of the petals are now on the ground. But we've got, I don't know, tulips all over the place. We've got, I don't, it's just crazy. Forsythia bushes, brilliant yellow, love them, absolutely love them. Just makes me feel well. It's like the phoenix, rising from the ashes.
Mhm. One
That's
of my
such a cool thing because it really, really does describe what happens, in the springtime. We come to a climax late in the fall, and over the winter it just lies dormant, and then in the spring suddenly the phoenix is back again, and it's 5 times more brilliant than I remember it from last year.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing is that, just we were talking about in this workshop I gave yesterday, and it was just this feeling of, I think it's always a very hopeful feeling to me. Like it brings in this element of hope that even during the darkest times, there's like going to be a light at the end.
Yeah.
That through that winter months where everything does happen and it happens to be so dark and everything, and it doesn't matter. We can have a really easy winter and we can have a really like slamming winter where we get slammed with ice and snow and cold, and then all of a sudden, and it still happens.
Right.
We get that explosion, and so of vibrancy and color and birth, almost renewal, and so it really does. On my little creative project that I did for the Tree of Me project, I wrote down hope. That was the word that I wrote down. Hope and miracles. Um,
Mm.
which came to mind based on this time of year.
So do me a favor, because you, before we got on, you showed me a sheet of paper. Just describe that wonderful sheet of paper and what you did with it and what people reported, getting out of the exercise.
Sure. So it is a visual, it's a tree, and there's, it has like a line where the ground is, and then there are roots, like the root system underneath, and then the trunk, and then the leaves, which were the heart leaves. And we just asked people basically a few questions revolved around um around this tree, what grounds and supports you. So meaning things like your values, the people that ground you, keep you and support you, the practices you might have. On mine I wrote down, yoga, meditation, nutrition, like the different things that you have that support you. And then what keeps you strong and upright, your strengths, things like boundaries, other elements. And the last is, where am I growing and what am I reaching for? And there's, when we got on originally, I was sharing this with you. There's one thing about, to me, which is the gift of doing a project like this, is it's one thing to say it or to even think it, but there's like a different level of sort of realization when you actually write it down. And then again, and then we have an opportunity for everybody to share if they choose. And then when you share it with others, because then I think it's almost like you own it more. It's
Mm.
like, there is like when you say something out loud versus when you keep it hidden, all of a sudden it's out there in the world a little bit more. And then
Yeah.
also you have the ability to hear what others are saying. So people like used words, and I thought, oh my gosh, like I don't have any place on my tree right now that doesn't that's really important to me. And it reminds me of other things that I really consider important and valuable
Mm.
that I might have forgotten.
Yeah. What's neat about it is, writing it down makes it durable. So it exists longer than just hearing the words spoken out loud. And the other part of it is that however you say it, it resonates with people, maybe in a different way than you're saying it, but they get something out of that too. And the ahas come from people continuing to share what they're seeing in their own introspection. And
Mhm.
a lot of times, especially when you get people who are, um, I'm going to say, highly trained, educated, skilled, also probably used to having the same kind of conversation all the time. When you break out of that homogenous group where they're all, sort of in their usual echo chamber, and somebody else comes in with a new thought, saying maybe even saying the same thing that they've always heard, but in different words. The change of language, is enough to kind of like spark, a little bit of interest and inquiry.
Yeah, and I think that was also really special about the whole experience is that with everyone, we told people they could color it, they could like, get creative around that tree, whatever they wanted to express on that tree. And is how everybody's was different. And so I mean, basically, it's kind of like you look at it and you think to yourself, well, how different could people make this? And then all of a sudden you give it, and as everybody shares, and somebody uses stickers, and somebody else just uses, all these colored, and there's like no rhyme or reason. I mean, somebody did this beautiful root so that off of one root came like, which might have been, you might have think have been linked to one set of leaves. So she made, where you could either do it the same color or different colors. And, when it all means something for somebody. And
Yeah.
for her, that different color, like leaf than the root, sort of symbolized the fact that sometimes we have no idea what's going to happen. Like we put out seeds or thoughts or ideas, and we don't really know what's going to happen.
Right.
And something surprising happens instead. And so kind of gets us out of this like planning mode and just kind of being open a little bit to like whatever's going to happen.
The good
So,
stuff.
yeah, the good stuff. And so in that way, it was really beautiful. And we do a lot of projects like that in these workshops, different ones, but very similar in the fact that we always have a sharing. And usually it revolves something around where we're actually asking people to express something that they might not either communicate or might only say in words, and they might not express in another form.
Yeah. I like it because the word express is really very powerful. The whole notion of self-expression. We talk about self-care and self-love and all the rest of that sort of thing. But the notion of allowing an expression of who you really are in the world, sometimes, you can be a little jammed up, with things that are going on, world events, family things, what have you, and maybe not feeling too much like sharing until you get into an environment where not only is it safe, but it's fun. You're not risking, by getting something wrong. You're actually creating something, co-creating something with another bunch of people. And like you said, you get on, you don't know where you're going to be getting off, but just have a nice ride, and enjoy the scenery while you're doing it. Just go with it.
Hmm. No, and it's so true. And I think there's so much, having you and I think everybody out there has had challenging times. And I think that's the gift of things like art therapy and other forms of expression. And that sometimes, often what we cannot communicate in words necessarily, we can communicate in another form and
Yeah.
express in another form. And even though that wasn't particularly like that wasn't our intention for this, but I have used for other things like that, where it's an opportunity to be able to process and digest. And even this of like, what do I value? And having to reflect and kind of, if you haven't asked yourself that question, having to ask yourself that question. And those are good questions. I mean, I think those are valuable questions to me. Like those are the questions that almost feel like gems are revealed, like
Yeah.
jewel, because once you recognize what's important to you, then I think it reframes and it kind of categorizes a lot of the stuff we think about. And we realize like a lot of the stuff that's in our head and that we think about is really nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah, the notion of having ahas and insights while you're doing something like this, I think the neat part of it is to try to at least capture the flavor of the feeling that you've got in that moment so that you can revisit it later on and maybe look into it a little bit more, kind of get interested in where that was leading to. Is there more juice, in terms of expressing yourself, that was kind of pointing to the doorway of. And again, thinking about like what's happening with all the new life outside. We see baby animals, birds, what have you. And some of them, they're like thoughts. And sometimes, a really great notion or an idea can be like a guppy in a shark tank, you know, that it's going to be a snack and gone in a second, and not even be a memory, you know. And sometimes your really cool ideas have got to be, you got to codify them somehow. You got to write down, you know. I just noticed that when I put energy into doing this activity, it yields this result in terms of not only my feelings, but my connections with other people. And I wonder what else is behind that, or I wonder what other practices that I might be able to engage in and that would yield the same kind of outcomes, or maybe even more so, you know?
Hmm. And I think the other thing that happens when, one of the gifts of expression like that or some other avenues is really the feeling of being present, is,
Yes.
of presence. When you're doing something like that, you're really not thinking about anything else. You're sitting there, maybe you're thinking about the colors and you're thinking about whatever else you're going to put on, the thoughts, the values, whatever it is. And I think that there are other ways you can get that same feeling of presence. This is just one way of doing it. And so what when you said that, what it like kind of triggered in me was this feeling of like, oh, well, what happens? What things make you present? And that could be cooking for somebody. Maybe that is their real, like my sister in law loves to cook. And I think that that's the way she expresses a lot, processes a lot. I think it's reflective time for her. You know, I think other people, it's art. Other people, it's music, writing, you know, being in nature. Um, just pick your pick whatever like lights your boat kind of thing, floats your
Could be
boat.
all of the above, you know, just whatever the notion of creating something from nothing, which can be very, very rewarding. I mean, just look at our conversations on a weekly basis.
That's it. Absolutely. And I think going in, which is hard for people, going in without one expectation, and the other thing is non-judgment, because I think we people tend to, for whatever reason, label themselves
Yeah.
as whether they're creative or they're not creative. I think I'm a firm believer that everybody is creative. If you're living, you're creative. That's just, the way. And if you're not, I'll give you like, examples of ways in which you're creative that you might not have thought about, but I think anytime you switch your schedule around, or someone calls and all of a sudden you're picking up the kids and you have to navigate like how you're going to like get from one place to another place, and whatever, you're creative, like you have to be creative.
I mean, hey, did you dress yourself this morning?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
A whole host of decisions that had to be made there.
That's right.
And when you get a little bit older and your joints get a little bit more stiff, how you get your socks on can be a little fun deal as well.
Hmm.
But you know,
Yeah.
if you know the whole notion of gamifying life, where
All
you
right.
kind of create um, some rules, and you start and you create a reward, and just have fun taking the mundane and the mediocrity of the daily blood and guts physical world, and turn it into like a hero's quest or something of that nature, and just have some fun with it.
Uh, yeah, I was never a big game of like that word gamify, but on the other hand, I do like the whole idea of offering myself rewards if I do certain, like if I get something done which I really don't want to do,
Yep.
or something like that, really, like if you do this, you know like get this done, and then you'll spend 10 minutes reading that, or listening to that you want to listen to, if I have to focus, so it is gamifying, but I guess maybe that word just doesn't resonate with me. But it is gamifying. It's making something like trying to bring joy into, like, or this whole idea of really treating yourself well.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it starts off with children. I think I've told this story before, but in my house, I could often hear my younger siblings doing the pretending game. Like pretending like you're the father and I'm the mother, and then we have a baby, and the next thing you know, the baby's crying, and we have to get it a bottle, and it's like, um, why do kids do that? Because it's boring not to. And kids that bore, I mean, they abhor, not having fun. They really do not want to be in a situation where life is just boring. They're not about that. So the pretending game is something every once in a while, even in our 40s, we would play that game in the swimming pool at 2 o'clock in the morning after having a few cocktails at one of my places down in Florida. And you got to, and it's a scream. It really is, to go back and kind of re-examine with the capacities, whatever they are at that age, playing a game that we did when the average age was between 5 and 10 years old.
Well, even if you have like um, multiple little people or you're exposed to little people at all, like to actually play with them,
Yes.
I mean, is such a valuable because it uses one of my favorite things, and that's imagination. Like there's this feeling of that's what you would do when you did like, those house games. It was kind of like, oh, we get to pretend and we imagine and to some extent, even though we are not kind of, we are the dialogue is very much around things that we hear,
Yep.
and people were around, but still there is this element of creativity and thinking and just the way kids logic works versus adult logic, and which is just precious the way they think of things
Right.
versus the way we do.
Yeah. I think the pitfall is trying in trying to understand it. The fun is just playing the game right along with them, and kind of getting into it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, maybe explain further about what, like, understand it. Like, it's
Well,
kind
for instance, when you start asking why dogs and and kids do things, um, that's really kind of begging the question. They're not doing it because of a why. They're doing it because it's creative and it's what they're thrown to do. Other things equal, and so a good example is when a dog makes a toy out of something in the living room and goes crazy playing with it for a half hour, 45 minutes until it just drops and goes to sleep. Kids do that too, you
of,
know?
oh, absolutely. And thank you for explaining that because I love that explanation. I think that they play for the sake of play.
Yeah.
And that's really to me what you're saying, and I love that because I think that that's what we ask people to do when we come to our workshops. We ask people to create for the sake of creating
Yep.
and to try not to attach to the result or and I'm not, this is all a process for everybody, and for me being in like, you're depending on your personality, but this idea of getting it right or getting it wrong or how it looks, like we all have those things as we get creative, and very,
Right.
but then you do get to a point where you're like, oh, you just create for the sake of creating because your mind gets to get a vacation a little bit and you get to reflect and kind of filter out some of the gibberish
Yeah.
and dialogue. And I think kids play for the sake of playing, if no reason. And we were talking about this over the weekend because my brother was asking, or I don't know if it was this past weekend or the weekend before, and he was asking me if I remembered when we would go to my grandmother's, she would have the old craft cream cheese containers, which were like silver and metal and like were made out of metal.
Yeah.
And she would save them and clean them, and we would use them as like pans and dishes and pots, and we would play kitchen. I mean, that's what we would play. We would, and so we would go. And he asked me if I remembered, and I said, "Oh yeah, of course I remember the cabinet in her house that we would use that was like the refrigerator or the oven, or whatever it was, and those containers, and obviously." Nothing was wasted, everything, every container and every jar was valuable, kind of thing. In those days they saved everything. And so just that feeling of it was really, to me, it's the innovation and the imagination that
Yeah.
that's key. um Keep that alive. You know
Well, the word play, um, an adult expression of the word play would be something like, to give and take without intent and no need to balance accounts, right? So if you were to just extrapolate that simple definition to all of your actions and activities in life, there'd be no need to compare yourself to anyone or anything. There'd be no looking for slights or giving of slights. There would only be, in the moment, to enjoy the moment, as many moments as possible. And that's kind of a neat way to live if you can remind yourself to do that, because we are thrown to evaluate and judge under every single circumstance. And it's just, you don't have to think about doing it. It's pretty automatic. But what the fun part of it is, the gamifying of that is when you can give yourself points, for, oh boy, I was really judgmental right there. That was pretty cool. I think I went over the top a little bit. What did you think? And poking fun at yourself is a really, really powerful way to um, kind of get over significance. Where we're worried about how significant life is and that it's scarce and short and we'll never have enough and all. Get out of there. There's nothing going on in that room. Have fun, I say.
you say.
Yeah.
No, and I think that there is, opportunity. Like I look at the practices that, let's say I do, and if not getting painful, but really, let's say lightening up about the fact that, you're in meditation and your mind wandered again. It took me a long time to lighten up about that because there was
Yep.
a particular goal. The goal was to keep yourself focused, and to not get distracted and let your mind wander into into what someone said to you yesterday and the fact that you were hurt and you got angry and you're still angry at them, and then to
Right.
redirect. But it's like it becomes a game, and it almost becomes like, even if it's not funny, but it's almost like this feeling of lightening up. Or just if it doesn't happen, it's like, oh, there I went again. Like it's like I went on vacation, my mind went off. Let's direct it back. And it's just to lighten it up a little bit. And I look at my yoga practice. I've always looked at my yoga practice, or not always, for the last number of years, as being like that. It's playing. That's what it is. It's really just an opportunity for me to, like, I'm not on a jungle gym these days, but like my own, home jungle gym where I get to make really interesting shapes with my body. And I just, and I can do it some days and I can't do it the other days. And sometimes it happens on the most inopportune moments, as a yoga teacher, where you sit there and you can't balance to save your life. And you're sitting there going like, I'm teaching this stuff and I really still can't do it. You know?
Well, see, that's the part when everybody knows you're human,
That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
and our human moments is when we're the most relatable. It's probably the ones we hate the most, but you know what? Here I am. Now I have, there's no emperor's clothes here. I'm no different or better than you are. We all hit our moments where it's just not working. But the other neat thing too, Janet, occurs to me while you're saying that, when your mind starts to go away from your intent, that maybe would be fun to just play that out and see where it goes all the way, like, all right, so now I'm distracted. I'm over here. I'm thinking about this, but let's just really get into that and share it with the group. Here's where my mind's going. How about you?
No, I mean, I like that too, just because I think that One is it starts to normalize it a little bit.
Yeah.
And, I meet a lot of people, a lot of students who will literally say to me, I'm a bad meditator. And because we have this idea in our head that, we should be able to focus our minds so we're not distracted and everything. And it becomes, and we feel we did, I was, oh, I can't meditate. I tried, I failed. I have people who say that to me. And I'm like, you can't fail. That's all about, and trying to encourage people to explore more and understand that about it is really sometimes interesting, And yeah, it's really interesting when I talk to people sometimes about it, is expectations.
And of course, we got to be judgmental all the time. I'm a horrible meditator. There's some things I'm pretty good at, but I suck at meditating.
Right, exactly, exactly.
So the neat part of it is that let's get really ridiculous about it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to give you the keys to the kingdom about meditation. Are you ready? On the count of three, don't think. One, two, three. How long did that last? So the whole point is that there are things in life that are meant to be an ideal. That means not achievable. That means like something to pursue. There are people who spend their entire lifetime trying to master one part of yoga, and they will tell you that the moments of bliss are, they're literally a handful of seconds where they can really feel themselves being fully present in their meditation and having no thoughts, kind of like being thrown out of an airplane, before you parachute. You get that minute of the wind hitting you at 100 miles an hour with this, the ground coming at you very quickly. There's no thoughts going on in your head at that point. That's the closest that I can recall to when I was just being born, of not having any thoughts at all. It was just pure, five senses of reaction.
I mean, I'll get it in meditation. I'll have points like that, but they're fractions of time. And, the, and yes, it feels wonderful not to have any, like, just to be sort of blank and be like a blank canvas, like it just feel, or a blank page on a notebook. Like it feels great.
Yep.
And that's what keeps you coming back. But you don't live there. It's not possible, and it's those moments which keep me coming back to what I do as a practice, because I need that space, because otherwise I probably would have gone more crazy than I already am, you know. But there is that feeling, and it is, but that doesn't, like, it doesn't mean, like, and I have days where it totally escape, or probably weeks where it totally escapes me and I'm not able to get there. And I have days where all of a sudden, days in a row, I'll be like in a specific place. And I mean, I know what that is for me now.
Yeah.
But I have times where, but that doesn't mean I don't practice. But, it means that I kind of, because I really feel like it's still doing something, even though I'm not, maybe, I'm still not a blank page. Like there is still an element that happens, maybe that I don't even notice, maybe.
Well, I think really the access to the higher plane of enlightenment in all of that is to notice the thrownness, to be judgmental, and to give it a value. I suck at being a meditator.
Right.
So the game to play there is what if I don't have to give it any kind of a value?
That's
What
right.
if it's like I breathe in and I breathe out and I don't care,
That's
that
right.
of all the different possibilities that there are for me in any minute, one of the possibilities is that I'm attempting to get to a meditative state that I may have experienced once before, or I've never experienced, but somebody has described and I think I know what it looks like, but I'm not there. So what if it's just like, okay, I fell off the bicycle. Let's get back on and do it again, you
Hmm.
know? And so the upgrade is Can you do this by being fully present and not necessarily, and also giving yourself kudos, when you just can just have it be what it was. It was it was kind of a neat experience, and I find that I was trying, and I really wish, meditation isn't something you try. Meditation is something you sink into by allowing everything to flow out of you and go away. When it works perfectly, those times you're giving yourself permission to let it all escape, to let it all go away. There are some days when you just don't feel like letting it all go away.
Oh, I absolutely. And I love what you shared about just like, could you be there without like that judgment and that label?
Yeah.
Or if you do label it, like to me, the next, like, okay, let's say I label it and I just sit there and say, oh gosh, that was a crappy meditation today. Like that was really bad. Like, do I attach to that and then go down the train of thought of like, oh, I never can meditate. I'm just this horrible meditator,
Yep.
like and have it snowball and become very extreme,
Yep.
you know, like I'm so rotten at this. Or can you just say, oh, okay, there's that thought again, like I labeled it and then let it go. So that's also a level of sitting
Yeah.
there and not going down the, oh, I never can do this and using that extreme language when probably, it's a mixture. If you've tried, you've had better days and you've had really bad days, and it's not like you're good or bad, it just is. And that's okay. But, when there are things, I mean, it's interesting to see also what catches you and what sits there. Like, you're like, and sometimes it's the day. Like, I'll just get up and I'm just, feeling negative, and I'll just be like, oh, I'm never good at this. And then all of a sudden I catch myself and I'm like, oh, like I used the N word.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never, or, always. This
Yep.
never works out, or this always happens to me, kind of thing. And then I have to catch myself and say, can I switch it? And even give an example of to myself of when I did do it. So the opposite. So that in my brain, I realize that that's like a false statement.
Yeah. So the Buddhists say that the root of all evil is not evil, it's being attached to an outcome.
Mhm.
And we live our lives, fighting attachment, and then our self begins to become cramped by all of the attachment to, a future outcome or an unresolved outcome from the past. So the main thing in life is to always resist rewarding the self for being right about being a terrible person, because you can find so much evidence for that. The game is to get into the inquiry mode and start asking, well, so if that wasn't meditation, what was it? you know what benefit did I get out of it? Did I derive any, did I any calmness? Did I derive any good feeling, in my belly and in my soles of my feet? Is there something that I came away from with that 15 minutes of sitting there silently, just allowing the room, to make its noises, and to hear the car off in the distance, or some, kid talking in the street, walking down, while I was here quietly attempting to meditate. It's like the neat part of it is when you are open to meditation looking a lot of different ways, it's quite possible you get more benefit from that than actually achieving your ideal meditative state.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
why not take inventory of the benefits of the things that didn't work out?
Mhm. And then yes, absolutely, love that. And then the other thing that happens when which I've been focusing a lot, the other thing that happens when we kind of get to that place where we can see a benefit or we don't go down that judgment is this whole element of being a little bit compassionate to ourselves and to
Yeah.
recognize that we are human beings, and we are, that whole flow, we're ever changing. We have a lot going, like either, in some ways, like we're kind of complex in the fact that we have all these different systems and like sensory systems that are all kicking in at the same time. at points. And it brings to me is like, even if you do go down that thing where I'm going to get curious about this meditation that didn't work, and I'm going to sit there and delve and see what I gained out of this. Like, if anything, maybe it was the fact that I could concentrate on my breath for like one cycle of breath, and that's what I got out of it, whatever it is. But also to practice this whole idea of that judgmental, berating kind of voice that kind of sits there and is so self critical that it serves no purpose but then to put you in like this feeling of like high cortisol, like high stress hormones, like which serves no purpose. And take my word for it, I've been there. So, it's a place I've visited often. So,
You've camped out there, right?
yeah, exactly.
Well, I think the really cool part of everything that we're saying is um, the identifying of a hit or a miss in what your intentions were. If you're using it for anything more than information on what the next attempt should look like, it's too much energy spent on it, and people will self-flagellate over stupid things that happen, making a mistake and blurting something out in public, or it's like that recurring dream that we have where you're out somewhere in public and you notice you have no pants on, um, or something along those lines that's equally as mortifying. So we relive, that experience of the dream over and over and over again, when mostly the people in the room aren't paying any damn attention to you at all. They could care less, or they couldn't care less. Actually, it would be impossible for them to care less. So the neat part of it is how about you caring a little bit less? How about me caring just a little bit less and a little more slack, and give ourselves some kudos and props for the effort, like, hey, you know what? That's what that was. That was a really great failure, and what did I learn from it? I learned nobody dies.
That's right. To me, when you said that, and that was what I was thinking actually, was the kudos to the effort, is just the acknowledgement of the fact that you did it.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. I actually sat down. Wasn't great, if I'm going to label it as good or bad. It wasn't what I thought. I wasn't relaxed,
right,
but I did it. And like, kudos to me that I actually sat down for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever the amount is, or whatever the task was. Yeah, I had that experience recently. I went to a meeting and I was not feeling um optimally, let's just say that. And so I wasn't in a great space. And um, and I think somebody asked me how it was, and I said, it wasn't great, but I went. Where it would have been very easy for me to sit there and say, oh, well, I'm going to stay home. Because that's what my tendency would be. Would be like, oh, okay, well, uh, I'm definitely not an extrovert. So I would be like, oh, okay, I'll just stay home because that's easier for me. It's more comfortable. I don't have to like say anything out in the public, and I don't really have to talk to anybody or whatever. And having expectations of how I wanted it to go, or just like how I wanted it and not feeling it. And then I just got home and I was like, well, but I went, and being happy, being pleased with myself for that, and kind of, which was a lot better than what I could have done,
right.
you know.
Yeah, it's funny. Um, I have to put myself in a particular frame of mind to even be able to say what I'm going to say. But there have been times in my life where I was stuck. I mean, so stuck that even asking myself if I wanted to put myself out to get dressed and go be with people, um, I couldn't get that far. And I think, when in the stuck space, the way I'm describing it now, the notion of having a breakthrough would be a little bit like winning the lotto, like no idea how a breakthrough is going to ever occur under these circumstances. I mean, I know clearly what I need to be doing. I know clearly what I should do. I know how to do it. I just don't effing feel like doing anything at all, you know? So there's that. And then when you get into the space of accomplishment, like we're obviously you're out of bed with purpose every single day. Maybe Jan, in your world, it's because you've got a week and you've got 5 different groups you're meeting with or something like that. And so now you've got a little bit of spring in your step and all the rest of it. Well, there's no notion of a breakthrough. Breakthroughs are normal. It's like the coin of the realm. When you get to operating at a particular level, it's like, no, we're not keeping track of breakthroughs anymore. We expect that. Now what we're doing is we're causing change in the world. We're working on lasting change for humanity. We're coming up with a cure for cancer and world peace. That's the gig we're working on right at the moment. So, you get into that rarefied air for a little while, and it feels completely foreign to even hear somebody talking about being as stuck as you and I have been, at different times in our life. And that compassion that you're talking about, you have to come almost like recreate how you would feel for somebody that you really, really love and care about when they're in a dark place. And all you can do is sit on the floor next to them and give them a big hug and say, hey, I don't know when, but this gets better.
No, absolutely. And I was just having this conversation with someone. I think it was based on our Friday conversation that my Friday audio Zoom, which is recorded and placed on YouTube that we do each week, Mary Jane McQueen and I. And it was on friendship and about the qualities of being like a good friend
Yeah.
and what makes up a good friend. And that's what came up was this ability to sit with someone and just be able to sit and basically hug them if they need a hug, but just be there as a presence for them, not making any demands on them and not expecting anything in return.
Yeah.
And that's a hard place to be often because we can't, most of the people I know, and I don't want to make this, but the majority of us don't want to want to make someone feel better. Like if we see somebody in pain, it's very hard to sit there and watch them be in pain. But, you know, it's,
Yeah. Sometimes that's all there is to do. That
sometimes that's
your friendship is all about being able to quietly sit there and, as you lovingly say, hold space for somebody. What that basically means is that however you're doing what you're doing right now, it's perfectly fine. You
that's
don't
right.
need to, you don't need to change anything. When you decide that it's time to change something, that's going to be perfect. If it takes you a while, I'll be sitting here with you.
Absolutely.
Unless
And
you tell me a better friend would just go away and leave you alone, because there are those times as well.
yeah, and there are those times where you really don't want, when you really do want to be alone. And there are those times, unless you have a dog, and then then they're there because
Get better now, mommy. Get better now.
that's right, exactly. They're in your face and they're like, oh, okay.
Dogs and kids.
Dogs and kids, exactly. And I think that and sometimes is the gift. I was talking to somebody recently and we were talking about, when you go through a real trauma, like having another being that's relying on you often is what gets you out because, at all, because you have to, if you have kids, you have to, there are times where, for a lot of people, they have to get their kids to school or they have to, take care. And then all of a sudden, even if it's just for short periods, or for me, it was like, I had to take Tonka out, or my previous dog out, you know, which, I didn't have anybody else that was going to take them out. So I was forced, in some ways, and not necessarily I'm not being negative about it in that force, but sometimes those beings kind of draw us out in some way, at least for pockets of time.
So what you're pointing to is you knew the job was dangerous when you took it. The choice about all of those times when you're not going to feel like it was made when you said, "Yes, I'll bring you home with me."
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, there's no return button.
No, but I'll tell you what, your relationship with that animal,
Oh, hey,
yeah, I mean, you can't describe it. There aren't the right words, you know? However, on your deathbed, you would still get up and take Tonka out to pee, you know?
that's right, that's right. That's right, I would. From heaven, I'll be taking him out,
Yeah.
you know, but yeah, no, I do agree that there's no relationship like that. But I do think that at points, yeah, we are drawn out by others. And then there are times when people just stay with us and good friends just have the ability to say, that's okay, I like that's why I'm like, that's what friends do.
Yeah, there was a Facebook meme I saw, I think yesterday, that said something like, "Thing about besties is whether you're doing something or doing nothing, it's always great." And I
It's,
think,
I was thinking
having
just,
yeah,
yeah.
having friends is work.
Oh, yes, it is work. And I shared on the Friday, which is a beautiful essay from the book Constellations by David White. And he talks about friendship, one being a testament to witness, which is what we're talking about,
Yep.
but also this idea of, a practice of constant forgiveness, of like, it's just this element to me of sort of practicing that non judgment. And like a good friend, they're human beings and they're going to do things that upset you, annoy you, you know, and eh, and that's to me like you sit there and I don't know, I think the element of compassion comes in deeply because you have a lot of compassion and you sit there and go, okay, well they're having a hard day or whatever, and you move on from there. And if you're not like if something's bothering you, you have the ability to communicate with them, but all that takes work and effort. And I'm reminded of a close friend of mine, and who I've known my entire, like literally, I think my entire life, all the years. And are we the same? We're so drastically different, and we lead very different lives. I love her to pieces. You know, has she upset me or have I upset her? I'm sure, but
Yeah.
never got in the way.
Yeah. While you were speaking, I was reminded of my relationship with Bob Kulik, my best buddy of over 40 years. His anniversary of his passing was 5 days ago. He passed on the 23rd of 2023. And when you were talking about how best friends can be annoying, the two of us made that into an art form. We were constantly berating each other about something, and we used exaggeration, whatever. And the goal was to see how far we could go before the other person just burst out laughing. But he was the teller of tall tales. He was the Baron of Baloney. He,
The Baron of Baloney. I love
yeah.
that.
Well, I said a few other words too. The Sultan of and the the King of Kaka. Whatever it was. But he would he would just call me up on the phone after I posted something on Facebook. Correll, what are you doing? You eat another side of beef over there? What's going on? How's the Maserati driving? There's just, a cadence that kind of gets developed between people who really love each other, and there's just an acceptance of no there you can't go too far with somebody who really loves you. You can never extinguish that flame, no matter what you do and no matter how you say it, because sooner or later you have to give up the act and turn yourself in, and yes, I really do love you,
Hmm. And it just, I'm thinking about a fairly new friend. I mean, if I was to sit there and say, as opposed to the friend I was just referring to, I've known my entire life. I haven't known this person that long in the grand scheme of things. But
Right.
just also, as I noticed lately, just this reciprocity, like she has something that's heavy on, like right now, one aspect of her life, and then having a very deep conversation about that. And then her, me going through a hard time and her being there for me. And it's just this, this give and take, and realize that, the true meaning of a relationship, like that's why, it's gonna like you do it like you, oh, now it's your turn. Like I'm, and also to be around, like, and I think also like to give someone a shout out when it really deserves a shout out. It's like, just to let them know, because I think there are very few people who actually give themselves shout outs. Like they actually sit there and say, oh my God, I did a great job on that. And to sit there and call someone out, like if you know it, and say, oh gosh, you did an amazing, like that was really good. You did a really great job on that. Cause I think that's so valuable too. So I think we need to hear those messages.
Yeah, the having a powerful witness in your life, there's nothing like it. One by one, we watch them, move on to the next plane. And it starts off with simple things like just somebody commenting and liking on your Facebook posts, or a telephone call once a week, or, an occasional send out card that just comes in the mail that stops coming, because they're no longer here to pay for for the routine. Um, I think it's blessed to be in those relationships where you love so much that it hurts so amazingly bad. And that's kind of like how you've lived, that you really had a life, and or you're in the middle of it right now. So along the way, I decided that I'm just going to love everybody, I'm just going to surrender to it, and I'll just be in love with you, like I always will, no matter what, for the rest of our lives, Jan.
Mm,
And quite frankly, I don't have to make any decisions about that anymore, ever.
and I thank you, Bill. And I love that, because I think that there is, you used one word, and I'm trying to like recall, like now all of a sudden it escapes me what that one word was, because that kind of, oh, I know, it was the fact that, it's to me, it's a measure of a life. Like, if you, and supposedly one of the signs of a life that's in trouble is someone who does not or perceives themselves as having no friends.
Right.
I mean, that's been shown, and it was really, as we were preparing for Friday, a few of the things I learned, which were really interesting, was, they were talking a lot of scientific studies now about friendship and companionship and connection, and especially um, with the issue around loneliness now,
Yeah.
that's happening. But one of the things they said was that it was actually people with close friendships. Like people always say, well, people who are married live longer or whatever, or in a relationship, but it's actually people with close friends. Um, that is like, is that's what they were saying in this study. So I thought that was really interesting. It that kind of, they separated it out, just close friendships.
It's a remarkable thought. And it's something to explore, because Whether we realize it or not, looking forward is a very powerful part of life. If you've got nothing to look forward to, um, that's I think that's where depression starts to set in. You know that you get to that place in life and you're pretty sure that there really isn't anything else good that's going to happen for you. Um, I think that's what friends represent, in my humble opinion. And good friends, those ones that whether you're doing something or nothing, it's always great. Those are the people that you can just be sitting in a room with, and every once in a while, one or the other makes a noise, and then the other person responds. And you kind of develop your own language. It's not even something that someone else would be able to observe and get it. They wouldn't get the connection. There's maybe an utterance that might be something that's referencing a shared experience from 50 years ago, kind of deal. And
Mhm.
somebody observing it couldn't possibly even have any idea what you're talking about.
Mhm.
Especially language of our kids. So I want to break my wife up. All I have to do, there's like four different words, and I can have her laughing in a minute.
Mhm.
And nobody would ever get it. It would look really like silly. You guys must be smoking something over there, but no, it's just presencing a really powerful moment when a 2-year-old said something profound to us.
That's right. You know, but I think there are those words anyway, which bring to mind, and you just laugh, and people like sit there and say to you, like, what's so funny? And it's just a memory that was triggered where you were like, or something that you did or someone else did where you're like,
Yeah.
which just makes you smile because, and often those are things that we did as kids or who we were then, you know.
Yeah. Be tendon. So guess what?
Right. Yeah.
We did it again.
I know. I know. Beautiful conversation. But as we ended up with friendship and kids, and we always seem to bring in kids, this whole idea of some of the um, some of the things like that tree of me, you know, which brings back that element of stuff we used to do as kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see using that tree of me where the roots are now write down everyone in your community that has some sort of an effect on you. And that's going to be your cleaner, it's going to be the butcher at Big Y, it's going to be the server over at Hank's restaurant, it's going to be your cousin out in Colorado who every once in a while posts something on your page, and then it's going to be all of those other people. And now on the leaves, demonstrate the difference that those people make in you.
Mhm.
What in you works that you give them credit for, that if they were not in your life, what those leaves would not be there.
Right. That's beautiful. Or what's at the roots, like those people that are there that, like, yeah, that allow you to do what you do or to think the way you think or dream the way you want to dream.
Right.
And, and what qualities within yourself actually, you know, bring that for you, bring that about for you. Whatever those qualities are,
Yeah.
kindness, creativity, discipline, like the different qualities that make up each one of us that make us us.
Interesting thought. One of the neat things to really ponder, ladies and gentlemen, is what are the things that you like about yourself? And who do you need to give credit for the fact that they're in your life?
Hmm.
Because you didn't do any of those things on your own. You and I are like plants, by a window until someone comes in and nurtures and feeds us and gives us good skills.
Yeah, either that or it's the lack of nourishment. I was talking to somebody about that recently. We were talking about the qualities that certain qualities that we get or that we now have. And I said, and maybe it was the lack of those qualities in your life, which somebody out there obviously revealed to you, but maybe you didn't directly receive. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, well, that's really important to me. And that's who I want to become based on the fact that like I don't want to have someone else be missing that quality because they weren't supported in some way. So could come from the negative or the let's say the lack of something and it could be from the presence of something.
Yep. Always
Oh,
stimulus and response, right?
that's
Or
right.
or lack of stimulus and response.
Right, exactly.
So any final tidying up remarks to sort of send folks on their way to have the best day ever?
Mm. Yeah, I think that, I don't know where everybody is, but since we're out here in the Northeast and it's really beautiful and springy, just get outside and spend some time in nature, surround like not even nature. I mean, it could be a moment, standing somewhere and just notice the trees or the plants around you or any flowers you might see or anything, or maybe it's the sun, the way it shines. But just get out and see if you can be really truly present and then just look at it and see if you can find one glimmer. I like that good word, glimmer, as I said it. One glimmer of hope.
Yes. Yes. Glimmer being kind of the opposite of a trigger. A glimmer is a good feeling that you want to be there and that you look to have, as opposed to a trigger is something that comes up out of you that you don't know you have, and it usually comes at a very inopportune and very not good time. So have glimmers, my friends.
Mhm. Glimmers are good.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, I want to thank you again for playing with me for another whole hour. Playing in terms of giving and taking without intent, and no need to keep score. So, folks, there are people in your life that mean the world to you, and I'd like you to just let them know. Let them know that they are important to you, and your world works because they are in it. And if you'll do that once or twice this week, that'll tide you over until we're back again next week with some more thoughts and some more conversation and maybe a little bit more love.
Absolutely.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And I'm Bill Correll, and I'm here with my favoritist buddy yet in the Knock 'em Alive work that we do, Jan Jeremias. Bye-bye for now.
Bye bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.